Harriet smiled a warm, motherly smile, wholly without conceit. She was aware that she was a pretty girl, but 2 elder sisters and 3 brothers younger than herself had taught her at an early age to put things in their proper perspective. She'd long since outgrown her youthful dreams of captivating some young, handsome and wealthy man with her good looks. But outgrown though they might be, they had so far made it impossible for her to settle for anything less. She moved soundlessly down the ward, adjusted 2 drips, took a blood pressure and carefully and gently examined the 2 emergencies. They were sleeping soundly. She supposed that they would go to theatre during the day. She reached the last bed and stood a moment facing the quiet ward, listening. She ignored the snores, the sighs, and Mr. Boat's tracheostomy tube's faint whistle. She ignored the background sissing of the hot water pipes and the soft rhythm of the electric pump beneath young Butcher's bed. All these sounds were familiar. She knew who and what made them. It was the other sounds she was listening for. A change in breathing, an unexpectedly sudden restlessness, and, more sinister, the quiet from a bed where there should be the small sounds of a sleeping man. Her trained ear detected nothing untoward, however, and she nodded, well satisfied, and turned to Sister's table, just as Nurse Potter, plump and beaming, edged herself round the ward door with a tray. She put it down carefully and whispered breathily, "I made Bovril toast stuff," and indicated the generous pile before them. Harriet was already pouring out the tea. "Oh, good, I love it, and I'm famished. I only hope we'll get the chance to eat it all." They began to munch, and presently, when their hunger was a little blunted, Harriet started to plan the morning's work. Night nurse's breakfast was always a noisy meal. Everyone talked and laughed with a false energy, inspired by the knowledge that the night was over once more. The paralysis of tiredness which had crept over them in the early hours of the morning had been forgotten. Later it would return, so that those who weren't already in bed were liable to sleep in the bath or drop off over a late morning cup of cocoa. In the meantime, they were all bursting with vigour. The staff nurses sat at a table on their own. There were perhaps a dozen of them, of whom Harriet was the last to arrive that morning. Late though she was, she looked unruffled and incredibly neat, and not in the least tired. "We stayed to help," she volunteered as she sat down. "There's been an accident at the brickworks." There was an understanding murmur. The brickworks was notorious for the fact that it could always be relied upon to fill any vacant bed in men's surgical at all times. She was left to make a substantial breakfast at her leisure, and not until she'd poured her 3rd cup of tea did someone ask, "Has anyone seen the new RMO? I ought to have done. After all, I am on medical, but all I got last night was our Mr. Rugg." Mr. Rugg was young and uncertain, and definitely not a ladies' man. The speaker looked around the table until her eye lighted upon Harriet, who'd gone a delicious pink. "I might have known. Harriet, where did you meet him?" Harry put down her cup. "Oh, he came onto the ward last night," she said serenely. "We had that cardiac arrest, remember?" She looked inside the empty teapot and put it down again resignedly. "He's nice, good-looking, and one of those gravelly voices and polished manners." She was interrupted by a chorus of knowing groans. When they'd subsided, she added gently, "He's engaged." A disappointed voice asked, "How'd you know? He couldn't have had time to tell you that." "Well, he talked while he was making up the chart. I expect he felt lonely and wanted to talk about her. Perhaps I've got a sympathetic face," she observed hopefully, and was greeted by a shriek of friendly laughter. Her friends and acquaintances holding